Rosalyn, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. I feel like this is such a long time coming. I've been wanting to bring you on forever because you are one of these badass mujeres who is out here in the real estate investing world, giving us the information that we need in order to build our own little empires as well. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm a huge fan, so I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much. All right, so let's start off with an intro. Tell us about who you are and what you do.
Yes, so my name is Rosalyn Ortega-Elie. I am based in New Jersey, originally from New York City. Dominicana, American. I really focus on just teaching newbie real estate investors how to get into investing. Also newbie entrepreneurs, so folks that want to have a local business that need to learn about marketing, social media, or just overall planning to generate revenue. So I kind of stick to those two lanes. My passion really is building wealth through ownership. I've worked a career for 20 plus years in hospitality. I did all of the corporate politics and all that nonsense and just kind of fed up with it. But I did learn a lot along the way. So I just want to promote, folks owning, generating their own income, just as you do, figuring out ways to just escape the rat race and build for themselves.
Absolutely. I love that. And I love seeing women from our community do this. I'm curious for you. So you mentioned having a career in hospitality. What was that moment for you that you're just like, I'm so sick of this shit. I need to get out. And then where did your mind go? Right. Because I think a lot of people have that thought initially where they're just like, this career is trash. This job is trash. I don't want to do this. But then there's a blank that happens when it's just okay, but what other options are out there? So how did you finally find your way out of the rat race?
Yeah. So for me, it happened way before I even left the job. Right. So it was years in the making where I would go to conferences on behalf of my hotel or go to workshops, trainings, and have to learn about how to reevaluate a team or get rid of a team. And it was just a lot of things that happened that didn't feel right as a human because it was all in corporate interest when it came to slashing payroll, slashing expenses, people that worked really hard in hotels to kind of provide for their families. But here I am, following my boss's lead on we need to get to this return, specific number. And I always said, we are all just a number on a spreadsheet. And I really mean that because I've seen it happen over and over again through the years. So I think the last incident that happened was where I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way to get out of this because I can definitely be the next one, on that spreadsheet. And I think that's what did it, just kind of playing the game. And of course, I understand capitalism and all of that. But with me personally, it just didn't sit well to be on the other side, on the human level. So
that makes sense. I mean, you never know when you're the one who's on the chopping block, right? And at the end of the day, there's this big myth that I think a lot of people have where corporate job is the safe thing, especially if you come from an immigrant household and maybe your parents were never in that world. That is the pinnacle of what we're told we should be achieving. It's go to school, get the degree, get the 9-to-5 job with the pension and the benefits, as if that's going to save you from the potential of being laid off and having financial insecurity. So it really is up to us to create that financial safety net for ourselves. So what did that look like for you? Tell us about your exit strategy.
Yeah, so I started Urban Teach, which is my online education platform, back in 2017. I was still working the job. I realized that a lot of us didn't have, the financial literacy side of things to make good decisions, right? So at 19, I was in that 25 grand right after high school, just because, we all got those free credit cards that were not really free with a t-shirt. And then around me, I just kept seeing all my peers, get into debt early, working 2 jobs, overtime wasn't ever enough. So I started doing these workshops around bringing in speakers to teach the community about first financial literacy, second, how to build a small local business to supplement income, and then real estate, because I became a landlord in 2012. So I figured, I learned so much through trials and tribulations. I was like, let me put this into a workshop. So with that, for the first year or two, I kind of funded the whole thing. I was making no money. I had 300 followers on IG. It was mostly family and friends. I realized that the workshops were filling up. They were people were showing up and everything was selling out. This is before COVID, before pandemic. Of course, I grew the business somewhat. I was not finally making a little money here and there, but then pandemic hit. So 2020 came, the hotel I was managing in Philadelphia shut down, just like a lot of hotels throughout the US. My entire family worked in hospitality. So my brother works in New York City. My sister was in another hotel. My husband works at a hotel. And all of a sudden, like out of the 5 family members, 4 of us, our hotels shut down. And that was hundreds of employees, just no income, right? Of course, a lot of this happened because of the pandemic. But it made me realize, like, okay, this is my opportunity to leave. Because now, for a year before that, I was always planning my exit. I was lining up my ducks and saving my money, dropping my balances on my cards, making sure the properties were in good standing. So I was planning for it. But, when that check keeps coming in every week, you're like, another week, another month, another 3 months. And then April 2020, I was like, okay, God, all right, I'm hearing you now. Like, I got to do this full time. And that's kind of how I transitioned into it.
Wow. Okay. So I want to go back in history, though, because you mentioned you became a landlord in 2012. So tell us about your entry point to real estate investing. Like, is this something that you saw family members doing, or like, are you the first?
Well, the only family member, excuse me, that I have that owns properties is my grandma, but she does it in DR. So not in the States. For me, that my entry point was, I was newly divorced. My eldest was 3 years old, 3.5. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in the Heights, paying this crazy amount of rent with a club in the lobby level. So we were up at night, 5 nights a week, like typical New York City crazy story, right? Bus stop right in the corner. So you hear the bus all night long. And I was like, I got to get the hell out of here. And I'm not going to keep paying all this rent. So I applied for an FHA loan, got approved, took money out of my 401k, took money from my savings, got Home Depot credit cards. Like, I was like, I'm making this work. So I got myself a 2-family with a basement. And that's kind of how it started. I moved into the basement with my daughter, fixed the other 2 units, got tenants in there, lived rent free for a good 16 months. Wow. And then kind of repeated that cycle.
And was this in New York too?
In New Jersey.
In New Jersey, okay. Yeah. And what made you want to go to Jersey?
Well, I always came to Jersey to shop. So I was in Washington Heights, which is right across the bridge when I rented. I always crossed over to Jersey on the weekends just to go to Costco, BJ's, Target, just to get away from the city. So I already knew that I wanted to be somewhere more suburban, especially for my daughter. Schools in New York City are a little crazy. Even if you get into a private school or charter school, it's just the volume. It's just too many people. And I wanted something quieter, more comfortable. So
yeah. And I think affordability too, right? When you can buy a 2-family property in New Jersey versus New York, I mean, right. I'm sure the dollars make a big difference.
Totally. Yeah.
So you find yourself April 2020, the signs have been pointing you in the direction of going into full-time entrepreneurship. So what has that looked like since then?
It's looked like a lot of ups and downs because it's never easy. A lot of pivoting, right? A lot of changing strategy, redefining what you're trying to do, a lot of learning. So I always tell folks, if you stop learning as a business owner, you're screwed. You have to keep innovating with the times and just learning about myself too. Okay, what fits me, what doesn't. I think at the beginning I was saying yes to everybody and everything. Hey, Roz, do you want to be part of this? Sure. Yay. I'm there. And then after the fact being why was I even there? Why did I waste that time? Waste that money? Why did I travel there to do this? This makes no sense. So there was a lot of that going on. So I think now, year 5, I'm very much focused on staying within the lane that I feel comfortable in, that fits my personality. I always will tell people you have to, you want to evolve as a person, but you got to do kind of what fits your personality, because if you're doing something that doesn't, you're going to feel like it's a job all over again, right?
Yeah.
You're going to feel miserable sometimes. You're not going to want to do it. You're going to procrastinate. That's been a huge learning curve for me.
Yeah, I think it's a very important lesson that all of us have to learn, is the art of the pivot when it comes to entrepreneurship, because the world changes, markets change, opportunities, they come and go. And so if you want to stay afloat, you can't be the Blockbusters of the world out here just refusing to innovate, because you're about to go extinct. Okay.
Yeah,
and totally. We're going to talk about you in the history books. I always look at the red boxes, the abandoned red box thing outside of like a CVS or a Walgreens. And I'm like, damn, it's like a glaring example of just what it looks like to not innovate as a business. So we don't want to be in that space. And so your own business has evolved. You started with Urban Teach. You were teaching financial literacy, but now you've also branched out and you are the founder of a real estate brokerage where you're helping people invest in the Caribbean, which is freaking amazing. So tell me how you got into that.
So for years, I would travel to DR because I was in the hotel industry. I never liked staying in hotels. So Airbnb was like my savior. I was like, oh shoot, we could have a kitchen and a living room.
Right.
You know, our Latino families are huge. Everybody wants to come. Everybody wants to tag along. So hotels really never really worked for us. It's just, you got to get 3-4 rooms. And so anyway, started staying in Airbnbs in DR when I would go. I would always go at least once or twice a year. And after checking in, meeting the host or meeting the owner of the apartment or the house, I started realizing that a lot of the owners were not Dominican. So 5 vacations in, actually my daughter's 5th birthday, which was 3 years ago, the little one, in Puerto Plata. We stayed in a penthouse apartment, 12 of us, beautiful experience. The owner was German, right? So she comes in, we talk. So I'm curious, right? I sit her down. I'm like, how did you get to DR? Like, you're German. She's like, I came here in the late 90s with my dad. He owned restaurants in Puerto Plata. So I just stayed. I got married here. My children were born here. She speaks Spanish perfectly. She's beautiful in her Mercedes and her bag. And I'm like, fearless, like no fear about leaving where you're from and moving somewhere new to start something. And at that moment, I was like, if I spoke to anyone in my family and said, let's buy an apartment here so we could put it on Airbnb, I would probably get cursed out. Because they would say, oh, you can't do that here. It's corrupt. It's this, right? You'll lose your money. You can't trust anyone. Da, da, da. And then I was like, I'm going to keep this information to myself. The lady owned 5 other penthouses, by the way. It was like her business to run Airbnbs. So I went home with that thought. I slowly started just researching, what's the banking system like? Are there mortgages out there? What do you need to get pre-approved? What are the markets that are booming, right? Like Punta Cana, Santo Domingo. And then I just started doing my research, just like I did in the US, figuring out kind of where to invest. And then I decided that I will get on the sales side of things because I could educate the buyer so that buyers can understand pros and cons, finances, the numbers, especially for people that want to put their properties on short-term rental or to rent to long-term tenants. And then it just came about that I had the opportunity to do that. So I partnered up with a guy that's in Punta Cana. He actually reached out to me on Urban Teach.
Oh, how funny.
And I was like,
you never know when those connections that you're making will pop up.
This was the sign. His girlfriend was following me, tagged him and said, this girl would be perfect to work with you in Punta Cana. And then we just took it from there.
So you're the U.S. liaison and he's in DR and you guys have this connection now that you're able to funnel clients essentially.
Correct. So he's on the ground. He does my tours for all my U.S. clients. Of course, we focus on the tourist areas, but there's also other areas for first-gen Dominican Americans that are like, my mom wants to retire there in a couple of years. Where can I find her an affordable apartment? Do you have a reputable lawyer that I can work with? Do you have an accountant? So just facilitating like all of those missing pieces for folks that want to be, investing there.
That's amazing. One of the things that I'm really loving right now is watching people be like reinvigorated to invest in their homelands. I have to credit Bad Bunny for getting the fire going for a lot of, especially Puerto Ricans. There's a lot of people who are reaching out to me and they're just like, I know you own a property in Puerto Rico. Like, how does this work? Blah, blah, blah. Do you find that there's this hunger within the Dominican community to reclaim the motherland?
Yes. Totally is, especially in the last couple of years, because things have advanced so much with, technology and just the overall infrastructure, is getting better. There's ways to track things now where before it was like you had to go to the buildings department or in person to do everything. So there is a big boom in wanting to go back home. Of course, the expat community there is also huge, not just Dominicans, but folks from other areas or other countries. There is, though, that tug of war, where Dominicans are like, why are, these other folks coming here and buying up our land, driving up our prices? My point of view is, let's focus on us getting the piece of land. Focus on us buying back home, building that trust again, that you can live there, that you can do it there. Because everywhere else in the world, folks from other countries can go and buy. Even here in the States, right? You got folks from, even though it's not, the best example, but like China buying farmland, buying land here. The US doesn't restrict any other country from buying real estate here. So the rest of the world will never do that. I think the key is just to realize that we all have gems. Where Puerto Rico's a gem, Dominican Republic is a gem, Jamaica's a gem. Wherever other folks want to be, we as natives need to decide that there is potential in our back home.
Absolutely. I love that perspective. And it really does give you like a different level of connection with your culture when you are a landowner. I have a different energy in Puerto Rico now because it's like, I got rights here. Okay. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. Totally.
You're not just a tourist anymore.
Right. And now you have a daughter. So it's like, it's more than just the decision of owning something, but it's now she's going to go spend time there in Puerto Rico. You're going to probably get to know the neighbors or their kids. So it just becomes like a good starting trend within the family so that you might be inspiring a cousin of yours to do the same, or your aunt or your uncle.
I think there's a very powerful thing that happens when we reclaim the place where we come from in this way, because if we think about all of the sacrifices that our family members in the past have made of leaving everything behind, right? It's almost like you get to reclaim some of what was lost when you decide that you're going to go back home and buy a property and then have this really concrete physical example of like what that sacrifice has turned into, which is the ability for you to now have this piece of property that then becomes some generational wealth that you can pass along. And I think it also like it rebrands our homelands in our heads and for our community, because for the longest time, these places have been seen as places where you leave because there are no opportunities. And now it's like, wait a minute. Yeah. There's people from all over the world coming over here because there's so many opportunities. So what the hell are we doing acting like that's not the case? Because others can see it because they're not tainted by whatever traumas or past histories that we have associated with the places that we come from.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, with my parents too, they came to the States in the mid to late 70s. But they also came because they didn't have opportunities. So, my mom, rest in peace, she was like, didn't go to DR for 20 years. And she only went back because her mom had passed. So she went to do the whole burial. But for 20 years, she had so much trauma from growing up there with no resources that she's like, I would never go back to DR. Like, we had no running water. We had no power. So every year as an adult, I was trying to convince mom, come with me to a resort. Come with me to my next vacation. And she would not do it because, again, our parents experienced back home way different than what we are able to see it as now. But the point is to keep talking about it and definitely provide the information to the folks that are like, okay, let's go see if it really has changed.
I promise you it has, y'all.
Yeah.
You need to book a flight and go and see for yourself. Totally. All right. So one of the things that I did when I was researching buying a property in Puerto Rico was I wanted to get to know the neighborhoods, because it's one thing for you to like go and visit abuela and whatever, but it's another thing for you to like go with the purpose of understanding where those opportunities are. And so I made it a point to like stay in different parts of the island in Airbnbs because it just really helps you like immerse yourself in a neighborhood versus like staying in a super touristy area. I know that DR has a lot of like all-inclusive resorts that are completely walled off. So that's probably not the best place for you to go if you're trying to like see where these opportunities are. So what's your advice for people who like they want to potentially invest in the Caribbean, but they are not sure how to go about it?
Yeah, I would always say you can start from here. Online research is great. Areas, it depends really what your purpose is, right? Do you want to buy a place there for the family to enjoy, but also to rent out during times that you're not there? Do you want to be solely in a tourist destination? Because that's a whole other strategy, right? So first you want to determine what it is you want to buy this property for, like what's your purpose? And then yes, do your research online. What are the top 10 areas for residential areas for this? Or tourist destination areas for that? What's the pricing looking like? Has there been a sign of increased equity in those markets? Like there's a lot of information you can get from doing online research, But ultimately, I tell folks, do not buy a thing without going there first, right? So on the ground research is, you have to do it. You absolutely have to. Because like you said, that's where you'll get to see, does your surrounding match what you're looking for, what you're envisioning?
Yeah.
So being there on the ground, linking up with some real estate agents on the ground that you can go out with, that they can show you around. Just a lot of listening too. Like, what are they saying about these areas? Talking to the people, the locals also is a huge one. Go to like the local cafe shop that's been there for 20 years and talk to people there. There's a lot of research involved. I always tell folks, don't get driven by just the emotion of wanting to own something back home, because that also happens and bad decisions also can happen, right? So it's just about getting the research done, going there in person, and not rushing into anything either. Times are changing, so you just want to make sure that what you decide on kind of fits exactly what you're looking for.
I love that advice. I think it's absolutely realistic for you to give yourself like at least a year to do the research, the planning, figuring out where you want to be, really making sure that you're like comfortable with the investment, because you have to think about, you're not going to be there all the time. So you're not going to be able to like be monitoring things 24/7. You want to really have a firm understanding of like what's happening for the most part. I'm curious from a realtor perspective, like, is it similar to the way that it is in the United States where there's like a buyer's agent and a seller's agent, or is the system a little different?
It's a little different. It's a little more flexible. So I work directly with the builders because my main product line is pre-construction properties. So the construction boom has been in full effect there for now 2 years because of the lack of availability, especially, with the number of tourists coming in versus the number of hotel rooms. So the government has incentivized builders to build more residential communities, more condos and houses, stuff like that. So I'm working directly with selling, mostly directly with the builder, which then means I sign a brokerage agreement with the builder directly. So I don't necessarily have to co-list with other brokerages. I work one-on-one with them. And then I go out and promote the products, service the client, do all the paperwork, XYZ. The other way to do it is, yes, to list properties that are already available. That becomes a little more tricky because in DR, let's say Jose Maria over here wants to sell his house and he wants me to list it for him. Now I have to do the footwork to make sure that the title is clear as an agent, right? Because I'm not going to sell something that I don't know whether it's 100% free of liens or family situations. In DR, there is not a legitimate lien system, so you just can't place a lien on a house and keep it from being sold until it's cleared. But there are some situations where you might have a neighbor that's selling and their property is paid off, but then they might have a family member, might have come from the grandparents, and there's other kids involved. And the one kid that was responsible for it thinks they're the owner, but on paper, not really. So as an agent, whenever there's built properties, it's a little more footwork for us because we have to make sure that the property is legitimately clean to be sold to the next person.
That's common in Puerto Rico too, especially properties that were built like on a piece of land that the family's been there for generations. There might not even be like an actual deed. So things can get very complicated very quickly.
Yeah, totally.
What about from a financing perspective? Does DR have mortgages and things like that we can use in order to finance these properties?
Yes. So for pre-construction properties, the developer will finance up to 50% of the value at 0% interest rate.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So this is why a lot of the pre-construction residentials are flying off the shelf.
I bet.
So 0% while it's being built. So anywhere from 12 to 24 months, depending on the project, 0% interest. The remaining 50%, once the property is almost finished, then you can finance through a lender. So a traditional mortgage lender will not finance on construction build-outs or land. But once the structure is up, you can get a pre-approval, you can apply for one, get one. And that process is very similar to here. You got to supply proof of income, employment history, or 1099, tax return, stuff like that. They do run your credit report from the States just to see your credit worthiness, what kind of bills you got going on versus your income.
Yeah.
But they do not place that mortgage on your U.S. credit report. So you can own 10 properties on a mortgage in DR, and in the States, it won't show up on any of that.
Okay. Wow.
Place.
That's
Yeah.
pretty sweet. So would you like almost technically look like a first time home buyer if you have like a bunch of properties in DR and then you go to like buy your first one in the States?
Yeah, still. Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a hack.
Yeah, totally. You can still get your FHA here because it's not showing up here in the States.
Interesting. Okay. One of the things that I found shocking when I purchased my property in Puerto Rico was that if I wanted to have my name on the deed alone, and at that time I was married, that I needed to have a prenup because Puerto Rico is a community property territory. And so you cannot own real estate if you're married in your name only unless you've specified that in a prenup. Is that also the case in DR?
No, they will ask because, yes, technically, if you are legally married, they would want you to put it on title, but there's really no way to verify. So if you buy on your own and you just say click on that single box, there's nothing that will, deter them from giving you a mortgage.
Amazing. Okay, that's so good to know. Insurance. Is insurance a thing in DR?
Not mandatory, but yes, we do have insurance companies that have popped up in the last 5 to 10 years where you can insure your home, you can insure your Airbnb if you put it on the market, car insurance, health insurance, things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. From a short-term rental perspective, are there areas where that is like prohibited? Because what I see happening in Puerto Rico is like there is a pushback in certain areas of Airbnb allowances, because there has been such a boom in that industry. So I'm curious if that's happening in DR too.
Not yet. Haven't seen that yet. There is limitations on the building side. So the builder and the land that's available to be built, there's a limitation there because everything ocean front or very close to beach line belongs to the government or hotel companies. So a lot of these residential communities are going up, but they're going up, within 10 minutes to the beach, within 5 minutes to the beach. So they're getting very creative with their designs, right? They're building man-made beaches, saltwater ponds, like kind of like in Florida too, where they're doing a lot of that stuff. Huge communities with like a lagoon and like a walking trail and all that to compensate for not being on the beach. Those, for the most part, are all Airbnb friendly because they want investors to come in and buy there. Any property that you own beachfront at this point, very, very limited number can actually own there and or put it on Airbnb because the hotel chains have it on lock.
Okay. Are there tax incentives to being an owner in the Dominican Republic? Like, are there any special government incentives that people are taking advantage of?
Yeah. So for investments over 200K, you can get a dual residency. So dual US DR residency. That means that you can get a DR passport. So now you can travel international. There's some countries that don't necessarily want to mess with US passports. So you can go there with a DR passport. You get your cedula, which is like your social security ID in the country. You can open up businesses. You can start credit lines. So that's for a residency by investment. A lot of countries do that. The DR is 200K or more. If you buy a property that falls under the Confutur law, which is the law that is to incentivize investors to buy in DR, then you pay no property tax up to 15 years. And there's no title transfer tax, which is 3% of the property's value. So those are some of the tax perks.
This is blowing my mind. I'm just like, everybody needs to know what is going on in these places because there are a lot of people, foreign folks, who are taking advantage of these systems. And it's like, why the hell aren't y'all doing this too? Especially if you have ties to the Dominican Republic. Like, you need to sit down your family members and be like, y'all, there's a huge opportunity here and we need to be taking advantage of this. Because the last thing that I would want is for any of the places that we call home, as I say, Puerto Rico sin puertorriqueños, or, the Dominican Republic without any Dominicans. Like, that shit's crazy. Yeah. And that's what will happen if we continue to let others take advantage of these opportunities that are open to us.
Absolutely. And that's really kind of what the driver was behind me opening Smart Caribbean. Again, I didn't have the time to let me do a second business.
Yeah.
I have 2 kids. I barely get my manicures once a month.
Right.
It's a mess. But I was like, it wasn't out of I have extra time to start a second business. It was more I see a problem here. I'm in this space already. It would be crazy for me not to do something like this, right?
Yeah.
To educate about the market, to travel there every 2 months, to host retreats where I can bring folks over and like actually show them and they can get to see and experience what's happening there. So it was kind of like my calling. I had to do it. You know?
I love it. We got to show up for our community. So, okay. So one of the anxieties that I know I had as a new Airbnb investor was finding trustworthy vendors on the ground. You need the cleaning person, you need the maintenance person, the pest control, blah, blah, blah. What's your recommendation for finding reputable vendors and suppliers that like, you can trust, especially when you're running a business remotely?
Yes. So, because we're not there, right? So you have to really just rely on a property management company that specializes in short-term rental properties. That's what I would tell folks.
Mm-hmm.
But you should still have the knowledge and education behind so that if they're not doing their part, you can still catch it, see it, help fix it, right? At least at the beginning stage, I needed to find property management companies. So simple thing that I did was I went on Airbnb.com. I pulled up properties in Punta Cana, properties that were similar to the ones that I'm selling or investing in. And I would click on the host and you can see how many years they've been hosting, if they're part of a company or single. And I would message the host and literally built a whole database around, I got this property management in Cap Cana, I have this property management in Santo Domingo, I have this one in Puerto Plata, or one or two or three, just to offer choices. But companies are already established where you can see the reviews online, you can see they manage 100 properties, they have a whole team, cleaning team, maintenance team. They'll charge you 20 to 25% of the revenue. That's kind of their management fee for managing your property, but at least you know that it's being done correctly, right? So I always tell folks, don't focus so much on the spend. I would rather pay an extra 5% than have to be worried about certain things.
No, I agree, especially if you're getting to the realm where you have multiple properties. Like right now, I pretty much self-manage my single property in Puerto Rico because I have my cleaning people, I have a guy who can do like any kind of maintenance fixing, and I have my pest control, and that's pretty much it. And the folks, they can let themselves in and out of the apartment with a lockbox and things like that. So I've set up the system so that it pretty much runs itself. And, I message with my folks on WhatsApp and pay them electronically and whatever, and it works out. But I know in the future, if I was to have multiple properties, like there's just way too much shit to keep track of and make sure that like you're getting the check-in and check-out dates right and all those things. So it's just good to know that those resources are there. And, one thing I do recommend for folks too, take a look and see if you can find Facebook groups with Airbnb hosts, because I'm part of one that is for people who are Airbnb hosts in the specific part of Puerto Rico. So there's even like regional specific groups. And that's a great way to meet not only great vendors, but also local Airbnb people who you can also network with and get information from.
Yeah. And that's a great tip. It's like we have to use technology, what we have, social media is a huge tool. Like it's not just to talk about the chismes and the la prima. Did you see what someone was wearing? Like you could run a whole business just based on
absolutely
joining these groups, right? But let's use our resources for sure.
Yes. Okay. So let's talk to folks who are kind of on the other side of things where they're just like, well, aren't we part of the problem if like we're investing and having like Airbnbs, even though we have connections to the island? Like, what do you say to folks that are like, are we colonizing our own people?
I'm going to say that if you don't do it, someone else will. That's not even from there because it's happening.
Yeah.
Like we can't sit here in denial and think that government's going to like stop this from happening. No, like it's going to keep happening. So you either take the initiative to own that little piece of it yourself as a Dominican, as a Puerto Rican, for you and your family, because it will mean more for you because it's personal. It's not just a business thing. If you don't do it, someone else is going to come in and do it. And that's really the bottom line. I get a lot of hate for that too. Like I'll get comments on posts on my Smart Caribbean page that's like, oh, you're helping the colonizers, you're helping the country. I'm like, okay, so you're going to complain and bitch at me if you're Dominican, or you're going to take one of my free webinars so that you can learn how to buy property there.
Yeah.
And maybe your parents can go retire there and not live here in a apartment building full of roaches. Like, come on.
Yeah.
There's got to be a little bit of the honesty there that people don't want to hear, because it really is happening. It's crazy.
I love that perspective. Like, if you don't do it, somebody else will, and they already are. That's a fucking fact. Like, we cannot argue with that. What I love is I'm actually putting money in the pockets of these vendors that I'm working with. The cleaning ladies that work
Talk
with me,
about
they're
it.
all locals. The maintenance guy is local. Like, these are Boricuas that I'm putting
That's
money in
right.
their hands. That for me negates any kind of like weird energy around, oh, but you have this property that you're taking off the market. It's owned by Puerto Ricans. It's putting money in the Puerto Rican economy. You know what? A lot of the people that stay in my condo are fucking tourists, and I don't mind taking their money. Okay?
Yeah,
I don't mind
exactly.
taking their money.
Listen, they're going to give it to you, or they're going to give it to Marriott, Westin, Hilton.
Right.
That's not owned by any of us or even managed by any of us.
There you go.
It's okay. But on that note too, like I use a driver that when I do my retreats, he has a big van. He's Dominican. My chef is Dominican. The engineers I work with that come in and do their workshop, they're Dominican. The architect's Dominican. So I'm like, I'm putting money into my own people's pockets. Yeah. And I will only work with them because there's a purpose behind the model, right? It's you still want to keep the economy going within the locals.
Yeah.
And hopefully, if I am able to grow this thing some more, I will be hiring more locals to do the data part of it, the graphics, the designs, the whatever.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's going back to the point that you are helping your local people get a revenue stream as well.
I love it. Let's talk to women who might be intimidated to become real estate investors, right? Because I think we need to talk about this in the context that a generation ago in the United States, like it was completely legal for a woman to be denied a mortgage. So we are pretty much one of the first generations of women who can even be out here doing this stuff. What does it mean to you as a woman being a real estate investor? Like, how does that empower you?
It makes me feel like we've all been almost brainwashed to believe that we have to stay in certain lanes. So I posted something yesterday. Philly won the Super Bowl and the quarterback's management team is all women. And I saw that article and I was like, okay. From his PR person, his business manager, everybody, his core team is women. And I posted it and said, women are usually the ones spearheading all of these big wins behind CEOs, behind finances, behind organizations, corporations. But we often sit behind the camera, right? We're behind the scenes, making the boss look good.
That's a fact.
Always. If I can think of all my bosses that were male bosses throughout my career in hospitality, I made them look good. If I was not around to put shit together and run the numbers and keep things organized, they would not have succeeded. So I think that we all have to acknowledge that we have special skills and that at the core, we just can manage a lot, right? It's in our nature to learn it and do it well and not let any industry that's male dominated make us think otherwise. So real estate is one of them. I'm sitting in rooms sometimes where literally I'm the only chick there. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit right here. This is where I belong. And I'm pretty sure some guys in the room are like, is she here to take notes?
Yeah, right.
That's just the way it is. But I wouldn't let that stop me. I tell women, don't let that stop you. You just have to show up, know your shit, and keep pushing.
I love it. I love your energy, Rosalyn. And I'm really excited because you are actually putting together retreats now where you are having folks come. Is it to the Dominican Republic and learn more about what it is to be a real estate investor?
Yeah. So the retreats are every quarter or so. I'm bringing in folks that want to learn about investing in Punta Cana. I get to do workshops during the day. So we do workshops on the real estate market, starting a business, running a business. I invite guest speakers. So I'll have like my architect come through or my engineer come through. In this next session, we're going to have an attorney come by and other expats that have moved from the States to DR just to kind of share their experience. And then at night, we go out. We go have some fun. We go dance bachata, eat some good food, have some drinks, go to the beach. So these have been working out really well. I'm on my third one in March. The next one after that is planned in June. So the June one should be a good time. And yeah, that's the whole purpose, is to have someone see the true experience and kind of the potential of what it would look like if you own something there and you build something there.
I love that. So how can folks find out more about the retreats, and also how can they find out more about you?
Yeah, so the retreats are all listed on my website. So that's smartcaribbeanproperties.com. On Instagram, Smart Caribbean, and my contact handles are all there. Follow the Instagram page. I'm always listing new developments, new projects, stats on tourism. Every month, I kind of keep track of those things. What is occupancy looking like? How many flights came in? We have a tourism database in the country that you can pull the data and share. It's public info. So yeah, that's kind of where you can find me.
I love it. This is such a refreshing conversation, because for the longest time, I couldn't have even wrapped my head around being a real estate investor in my homeland. And just having that opportunity now has reconnected my family with Puerto Rico. Like, now my parents go on vacation in my condo, my sister, my niece, and everybody has like reclaimed something that they lost, whether that's just like being able to be there more often, or just feeling like you're now a part of a community versus a tourist where you come from. There's something really powerful that happens when we can reclaim these places that we come from. And so I'm so glad about the work that you're doing. And I hope that if you're listening to this and you've been thinking about going back to wherever you're from, whether that's Mexico, Dominican Republic, PR, whatever, start getting curious. Start getting curious about what ownership looks like, because you have rightful claim to this place where you come from. And it's about damn time that we started seeing more of us in these places.
Absolutely. The shift is coming, I think, with all of the nonsense going on here. And we already see it, right? The food prices up, rent prices are up, quality of life is going down, education's going down. Like, people are like, wait a minute, I have options. Like, I don't have to necessarily stay here after 5 years or 10 years. So I think, going back home or going somewhere in Latin America where you can still kind of have your culture that's more home to you than being not there is a good way to go.
It's wild. Who would have thought that the American dream might mean leaving America?
Get the out.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Janice. Appreciate you. Thank you.